Alright, welcome to a hopefully much shorter video than the last one. I thought for this video I'd entertain you with a game I'm good at, and then Dark Souls wasn't working with my controller, so we're going to play Marble Game today. I suck at this game, so bear with me. So this video is sort of stemming from the ideas of the last video, where I made the OS tier list. I was thinking about the two operating systems I use the most, and those being Windows 10 and the most current version of iOS, obviously, because I use Windows 10 on my PC and use an iPhone. And I was thinking about what I actually want from them to change in 2021, because I find that sometimes I'm maybe less critical than I should be of what I'm using. I don't push for change as much as I probably should, because I sort of become okay with how things are running. And I thought it'd be interesting to think about what kind of little things I'd want from an update in 2021, and I came up with a couple more things than I thought. So for iPhones and iOS, it was software and hardware, and Windows 10 is just software, because obviously I can't ask Microsoft to make a better Surface or something. That'd be absurd. If anything, I'd ask Microsoft to stop making the Surface. That thing's an abomination. I'm kidding, it's fine. But yeah, so I guess I'll get right into it. So first up, I have some notes for this one, so hopefully it'll be a little bit less disorganized. First up, I wrote my first point on my wish list for iOS was an always-on display for the OLED iPhones, and this is something that people have been asking for since the iPhone 10. But I think it's the most plausible to happen now because of two things. One, because it's been so long, and Apple takes a long time to implement their own version of whatever, a thing like that. They took a long time to do something like screen recording, because they have to do it the Apple way or whatever. So maybe they'll do something special with always on, just because it's been a thing for so long. But I think also it's the most likely to happen now, because I've seen a couple of rumors that maybe the next iPhones will have similar variable refresh rate displays as the newer Apple Watches, and the newer Apple Watches, what they're able to do is lower the refresh rate of the watch so much that they're able to have always on displays, because the display is only refreshing at 1 hertz. So if they put that in an iPhone, that makes it a lot more likely that they'll actually implement that feature, because it's easier to do, and they can sell it as ultra low, or ultra battery savings or whatever. And then also, as sort of part of that wish for always on is high refresh rate on iPhones, because it kind of ties in with the possibility of a variable refresh rate display. And iPhones were rumored to have the iPhone 12 lineup was rumored to be getting high refresh rate displays for a while, until just before launch, where it was confirmed that no, they didn't end up getting the high refresh rate displays because they didn't pass color validation and stuff like that, based on leaks and whatever. But I think after that theoretical first attempt internally at doing high refresh rate for the 12 lineup, I think it's pretty likely that the 13 lineup will get high refresh rate. So hopefully we'll see ProMotion. But I think that if they sell it under ProMotion, I think that it will come out as a Pro SKU iPhone feature. So iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max will be the ones getting ProMotion, if that's what they keep calling it. So next up, Touch ID. So Touch ID got taken away, obviously, with the iPhone 10, because Face ID happened with the notch. But earlier this year, we found out that, hey, Apple isn't done with Touch ID because the new iPad Air has Touch ID on the power button. So we didn't need a big circular home buttons to keep Touch ID around. So Apple, if you're gonna put it on the power button, you might as well put it on every power button. And I think the way that Apple could spin this, aside from it just being Touch ID is back, I think what they could do is they could make like iPhones are ultra secure because you need to log in with your fingerprint and your face. So they could put Touch ID and Face ID together to have some like double verification for sign in and stuff like that. So I think that would be pretty interesting, and I think that's pretty doable. So I wouldn't put it past them to do it, but I also wouldn't put it past them to just completely skip Touch ID and make the iPad Air a one-off. Another thing I'd like to see is customization in the app library in iOS 15 or whatever. I don't know, these numbers keep going up. I wonder when they're going to like rename iOS or whatever. But anyway, app library customization. I think it's weird because the app library is so new that either they're going to continue to improve it because it's such a new idea, or they're going to leave it alone and let it stagnate because it's brand new and it's shiny and it's fine and we don't need to touch it. But the app library where in iOS 14 is where all of your apps get lumped in because you no longer need to have all your apps on the home screen. The app library can be a little bit disorganized, not because it's not organized. Everything is categorized. The problem is that it's categorized with Apple's specific sorting of all of your apps. So you end up with everything cleaned up into folders that you may not necessarily like or want specifically where they are. So basically just the same as home screen customization, but let me do it in the app library. Another thing is I want to change in app library is there's a recently added or like recently used folder in app library, and I hate it because it doesn't it's not actually all that consistent. It doesn't keep in mind like what I'm actually using. It'll just see that I opened an app 2 seconds ago and it'll lump it in there. And every app I download gets in there as well. So I end up having this like huge repetitive recently used folder that I absolutely hate. So I'd really like to just disable that. So yeah. Next up, so I wrote in a reason for MagSafe to be considered superior to Lightning or USB-C, and then in parentheses, you created the problem, now sell the solution. So what I sort of mean by that is, I think Marquez Brownlee did a really good video on this and like related Apple stuff, where like back with the iPhone 7 they had the courage to remove the headphone jack, so they created the problem of now iPhone users don't have a headphone jack. What's the solution? Well, in the same presentation, Apple announced AirPods. So you don't need a headphone jack because now you have these spiffy new wireless earbuds that you can just use instead. Create the problem and the solution, therefore profit. So MagSafe. MagSafe is important on iPhones because it sort of alludes to the end of having ports on iPhones, because the rumor for a while was that USB-C might be coming to iPhones, and that if not, basically that they were ditching the port altogether. And the only way they can ditch the ports on iPhones is for you to have charging by some other means. So induction charging, MagSafe. But Apple is in an interesting position where they're presenting us a solution for a problem they're about to create, rather than doing them in tandem. So Apple didn't take the port away yet, the Lightning port away yet, but they gave us the MagSafe charger now and phones that are MagSafe compatible now to sort of get us used to the idea of MagSafe on iPhones. So I believe that that's part of the solution. The problem with the problem they're about to create is that the Lightning charger was for more than just charging. It was also for just general connectivity. So when you want to play music to something and you want to hardwire to it instead of Bluetooth, and you have a newer iPhone, so you don't have an aux connection, you don't have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, you just wire in with Lightning, because Lightning can do audio, so you just do that. How do you solve that with MagSafe? Where right now MagSafe is just a charging standard, and I think the solution, or the solution that they need to create for that problem that they're creating, is they need to make MagSafe data transfer capable, or they need to somehow flex some new syncing features, something like that. But I think the best way that they can fix that problem is by making MagSafe able to do some sort of file transfer. But the problem with that is that I don't know if they'll be able to do that with MagSafe. I think that more likely they'd be able to do that with a smart connector. So I think it would be pretty likely to see that, or I'm pretty likely to see either the new iPhones having a smart connector along with MagSafe, or a merge of the two. So maybe the back of every iPhone has inbuilt in the Apple logo or something, because the Apple logo is right in the center of every iPhone now, and so happens to be where MagSafe clicks in is right in the center of your iPhone. So maybe in the logo, in a way that is less, or that isn't visible, you build in a smart connector, so that you can do some kind of data transfer. But I again, I don't know how it's going to be very intuitive in terms of their design, and then on top of that, I don't know how it'll be very fast. I mean, iPhones haven't exactly been known for their speed in terms of connectivity. For one thing, they don't support external storage devices. Any Lightning iPhone or iPad doesn't support external storage devices. Only the USB-C iPads support them. And on top of that, even though some Lightning cables are physically wired up for 3.0, and some iPhones are USB 3.0 capable, most from what I've seen, even just in software and firmware or somewhere, iPhones are limited to USB 2.0 speeds when you hook them up to your computer for some reason still. Even with the Lightning to USB-C cables and all that, they're still limited to USB 2.0. So it's not all that fast, so they're not exactly have to push the envelope with data transfer speeds with the smart connector, but they have to do something. So there's that. Okay, and then next point I punched in was a smaller notch, and I really wrote that in because my thought process was more that Apple would hold on to the notch until they were able to remove it completely. It's like with the home button, rather than back when Apple only had home button devices, the devices with a big forehead and shin. Rather than slowly thin out those bezels and try to mess with that like other manufacturers are doing, maybe making the home button smaller, instead they got rid of it all at once by making a mostly screen iPhone with touch gestures. All right, so the way I see it is the notch isn't going away until it goes away completely, and the notch has stayed the same size on every iPhone since iPhone 10. So the notch on my 12 mini, which is a considerably smaller phone than the iPhone 10, has the same size notch. So it's pretty shoehorned in there, but they're pretty stubborn about it. So I really think Apple's just going to get rid of it all at once. But according to some leaks, the notch will be thinning out, or becoming a little bit smaller. So I wrote that in because a shrinking of the notch is welcome. I personally don't think it's all that likely, but it would be nice. Okay, and then battery percentage in status bar was the next thing I wrote. So, if you didn't know, if you don't rock an iPhone, a newer iPhone with the notch, because the notch takes up so much darn space on the top of your device, they decided that you only need to see a battery indicator icon, and that you don't get to see your battery percentage. And that's stupid. It's been that way since iOS 11, since the introduction of notched iPhones. And I don't know why. That's a software thing that they just decide to not do. You could put the battery percentage in the battery icon. You could replace the battery icon with percentage. It's one of those dumb little quirks that people get annoyed about, like the fact that iPads still don't have an Apple-made calculator app. Like, it's stupid and doesn't seem like it would be annoying or that big a deal or whatever, but it's annoying. And I use my phone every day, and it's something that mildly annoys me every day, and I'd rather it not annoy me. So yeah, Apple, just push an update. That's all. It doesn't even have to be a big update. Just literally a small update to iOS 14 or something. Just let me see my percentage in my status bar instead of having to pull down on the control center, because that is stupid. Okay, next up, I wrote customizable startup actions. So again, on full screen, notched iPhones, when you unlock the phone, you get options for, or you get two little like quick like hot buttons, and one of them is for turning your flashlight on, and one of them is for opening the camera. And it's a redundant, the camera button's a redundant one because you can also just swipe from right to left and open the quick access like camera menu. So I'd really like to be able to configure those buttons, because what if there's like a specific app that I just want to open from my home screen instead of having to swipe up and then click the app. Maybe I just from my lock screen, I'd much prefer to just be able to quickly go to something instead of having a redundant camera button and a flashlight button that isn't all that useful, and my flashlight's right in my control center. So again, just a small nitpick, but something that like they could easily do in a really small update. And then I wrote in more interactable widgets. So widgets on iOS 14 were great because before in iOS, widgets didn't exist, and now they do. And what's cool about widgets on iOS is that like most of them are pretty good. So any system app widget, which there's not a ton, but there's stuff for like news and battery and podcasts and music, and they look nice, and they don't like bug out or anything, which is great. They're stable. And third-party widgets, in the same vein, are sort of encouraged to be well-made and look nice. The problem with most widgets is that they're not all that functional. They sort of show you some basic contextual information, and but in general don't really give you that much to do on them. Sorry about that. But you kind of just look at what's in the widget, and then you essentially get some hyperlinks to things that you can do in those apps. So like for the music widget, you can like tap like the blank space in the widget to just open the music app, or you can tap on one of the like recently listened to albums or whatever, and it'll open up the page for that album. But like that's kind of useless to me. They could get a little bit more creative with it. I think it would be great if there was like a music player widget. So instead of it just being like a pop-up in my notification center, or a different contextual menu in my control center, I'd really like for a widget to show me a music player, for example. Or there's a widget for like Twitch, for example, that shows you that can show you like who's live, or if certain channels you're following have schedules, it'll show you their schedules. But what I'd like is a Twitch widget that can like stream Twitch videos, or Twitch streams, or VODs or something, or clips, like have like a clip reel. And this all sounds like it consumes a lot of battery, and it probably would, but I'd like the option. There's the people with the Pro Max iPhones probably have enough battery to spare for a quirk like that, so I think that'd be fun. And in general, I'd like widgets that don't just open up an app. Like I'd like a little like idle like dinosaur game or something, like the Chrome dinosaur game that I can play on a widget. And I think that exists somewhere, but I'd like for that to be more popular, and I'd like that to be a thing with system widgets. Like I want to be able to change settings in like a settings app widget, for example, instead of it opening up the settings app or something like that. I don't know. And then finally, on the list of changes that I actually think are realistic for new iOS or new iPhones or whatever, is ceramic shield on the back glass of an iPhone. So ceramic shield is something they introduced with the iPhone 12 lineup. Ceramic shield is what they're calling the glass tech for the front, for the screen of the 12 series, where it's more crack resistant, significantly more crack resistant than any glass they've had on iPhones beforehand, at the cost of being slightly more scratch resistant, or slightly less scratch resistant. So you can drop it and it won't crack, but it might scuff up a little more in your pocket. But I prefer that trade-off. The only problem I have with it is that it's not on the back glass, where to me it matters arguably more, because you can feasibly do a screen replacement. You can't do back glass replacements unless you have a super expensive machine from China, or unless you just buy a new housing for your iPhone, both of which are extremely expensive and very tedious options to pursue. So breaking your back glass is detrimental to your experience using the iPhone, because you hold it from the back, and you can't fix it, at least with a screen replacement. Like, even if you don't have the machine to reprogram whatever new screen you have to show up with True Tone, you can at least replace the screen and have a functioning iPhone. But yeah, so I'd like the back glass to be just as durable as the front glass, so that I can rock my iPhone naked a little bit more confidently, which I still am mustering up the courage to do with my back glassed iPhone 12 mini. Okay, now into the changes that I think are less realistic but still plausible, like still within what I'd expect from Apple. And so first up, I wrote in options for gesture-based navigation on iPhones with home buttons for convenience. So my thought process on this one was I've been watching a lot of like older tech reviews on YouTube lately, just because some older Linus videos and Marcus Brownlee videos showed up, like videos from like 2015, 2014, and so I've been watching those. And something that got brought up in one of Linus's old phone reviews was he mentioned his iPhone 4 that he got well over 10 years ago, or a little bit over 10 years ago now, I think. Something like that. My perception of time is completely off. I'm very tired. But whatever. Long time ago, Linus got an iPhone 4, and Linus daily drove an iPhone 4, and he called back to the issue that iPhone 4s had, where the home button would like stick in and would eventually stop taking in button presses. And obviously those issues got ironed out with later iPhones, but it made me think, like, how cool would it have been, instead of that like stupid floating assistive touch menu, how cool would it have been to have just had gesture navigation on an iPhone 4? And then I sort of thought, oh hey, what if every iPhone had, every supported current iPhone had gesture navigation? Because like I think about like the control center. The control center has always had for the full screen iPhones, has always had the little like battery indicators and stuff like that, because they can't show you everything in the status bar. But because on home button iPhones, they had a flat top screen, and so, or top of the screen, and so your status bar is able to show as much information as they want. And for a long time, the control center didn't show any information on older iPhones, but I think it was iOS 13.4, they changed that. So all of a sudden, older iPhones would show like your battery and your cell connectivity and stuff like that in the control center. And there were little things like that that they added to older iPhones that weren't there before. So for example, for a long time, 3D Touch was a big selling point on the 6S and the 7 and the 8 and stuff like that. And I think even the iPhone 10 had the iPhone 10 and maybe the 10s still had 3D Touch. And then with the iPhone 11 lineup, they were like, yeah, 3D Touch is expensive and it makes the screens really thick, and it's dumb. So they stopped doing 3D Touch in favor of what they call haptic touch, where because the new iPhones didn't have the 3D Touch layer anymore, and they weren't pressure sensitive, so they were like, okay, well, the phones themselves aren't pressure sensitive, but we still have all these context menus that we built for the theoretical pressure sensitivity, so let's just make everything that had pressure sensitivity before be just sensitive to long presses on non 3D touch displays, and then everyone is happy. And so that's what haptic touch is. And so when they went ahead and made haptic touch for things like the 10R and the 11 and stuff, or maybe the 10S didn't have 3D touch either. I don't quite remember. But yeah, I know the 10R didn't, and so. But so when they did that for like the 10R and all that, they also just added it to iOS in general. So with your iPhone SE, for example, your 2016 iPhone SE, which is essentially just an iPhone 5, those screens didn't have 3D touch, but oh, look at that, now you have haptic touch on your older iPhone. So now you have more functionality in the form of those 3D touch context menus on an iPhone that never had 3D touch and was never originally intended to have those context menus. So I think they could totally do that with gesture navigation as well, because I find gesture navigation to be oftentimes more intuitive than the home button navigation was on older iPhones. The switching between apps and the control center being on the top rather than on the very bottom makes a lot of sense. And if older iPhones, even if just as an accessibility setting, but I think it would be really, really simple for them to turn on gesture navigation on older iPhones. But the reason I put it in the plausible category is just because it's not a feature that comes from any kind of necessity. So it's not like, with the haptic touch thing, it was because a new iPhone was missing a feature, so they just threw it in and added it with older iPhones. Well, all newer iPhones are gesture-based anyway, so there's no point in giving the old iPhones gesture-based navigation, and also that the old iPhones aren't going to be supported forever. I think the oldest iPhone that they're going to support that doesn't have the gesture navigation is going to be iPhone 8, because they have to kind of support iPhone 8 for as long as they support iPhone 10, since internally they have this are extremely similar hardware. And so yeah, so there's a chance, but I don't think it's very likely. So next up, I wrote in better Windows 10 integration with iOS. In parentheses, I'm not saying things like FaceTime and iMessage, but at least like Boot Camp still, I wrote something else, but basically like Boot Camp still exists, so do this. My thought process behind this is that Windows 10 has this My Phone app that works really well with Android. That like you can hook up you punch in your phone number and you can get like text messages, I believe, or like notifications from your Android phone on Windows 10. But for iOS, the best you can do is download the Edge app on your phone, and then from your iPhone in the Edge app, send those web pages to your PC. And like that's kind of lame, because I don't like Edge, especially not the mobile app. Like I'm definitely a Chrome user in that I have all my Google stuff logged into all the time, and I don't want to switch to Edge just to have that basic integration with my PC. Plus, it's not even that good. Like, I don't want to just be able to send web pages. I want to like see notifications, and I don't need to be able to respond to them. I just want to see like new message to your phone on my PC. Like, that's not really much to ask. So, and the reason I think that's plausible is because Boot Camp exists. So Apple already makes a lot of software for Windows in the form of supporting their Macs. But the reason I don't think this is going to happen for most likely is because of M1. And unless Microsoft gets really confident and decides, okay, we're gonna go all in on ARM Windows 10, I don't think Apple really cares what Microsoft does with Windows, or what Apple's software on Windows looks like. So, yeah. And then I wrote in reverse wireless charging. At least let me charge those wireless earphones you forced me to use. So yeah, so I've got a pair of AirPods Pro because they're pretty great wireless earphones. And sometimes AirPods Pro have pretty great battery on the case and pretty great battery on the actual AirPods themselves, but reverse wireless charging has been hitting a couple Android phones, and I think it'd be nice for you to be able to use your iPhone with that big old battery or to charge your AirPods case, just out of convenience, because you never know when you're not topped off on your AirPods, but say your iPhone's been plugged in all night, but you don't have an extra cable for your AirPods. Well, you just put it on the back of your iPhone and they'll charge right up. But the reason I don't think it's all that plausible, or it's only kind of plausible, is because iPhones already don't have the very big batteries. iPhones excel at battery life because they're extremely good at idle power management and lately leveraging the whole big little thing. So they're just really good at power management rather than raw battery output. And reverse wireless charging, I feel like, is a feature that comes from just having sheer capacity. So yeah, but still possible, because they are pushing AirPods pretty hard, and modern AirPods and AirPods Pro have wireless charging cases, so there's a chance. And then I put in iPhone 13 Pro Mini. And so my thought process behind this is, okay, the mini form factor to me seems extremely fleeting. The mini form factor to me seems like a gimmick, and that scares me because I really love my iPhone 12 mini, more so than I thought. I just watched a video the other day from Jonathan Morrison talking about how he switched to iPhone 12 mini, how Peter McKinnon switched to iPhone 12 mini, and it's just because it makes a lot more sense from a size perspective, because it might not have all the bells and whistles with like LiDAR and stuff, but the compact, how compact it is makes it a much more enticing carry because it just doesn't take as much space up. And so I think Mini is more practical than Apple maybe thinks, because Apple doesn't like to appeal to consumers. So I really think that first of all, Mini needs to stick around. And second of all, I think Mini needs to come out of just base iPhone status. And now I know it would make the iPhone lineup really complicated, having 3 sizes for 2 SKUs of the phone. Like, you have the base model and the Pro model, and each of them have a mini, a regular size, and a max. And you know, maybe the base iPhones don't have a max size. The base iPhones right now don't have a max, so maybe just 5 models, but that's a lot of models for manufacturing and for marketing and stuff like that. So I don't think it would make all that much sense, but I really want Mini to stick around for it to come out of just being base iPhone status. And well, 1, because I want to continue to use a mini phone because I enjoy it, and 2, because I want to be able to get a Pro phone at some point, because I keep thinking about how I want to run my iPhone naked, but if I run it naked, I want there to be the least chance of it breaking. So Ceramic Shield on the front glass was one step towards that. That's why I was thinking Ceramic Shield on the back glass. And then a third thing would be getting just a steel frame iPhone, because the aluminum frame iPhones have a much higher tendency to bend, since aluminum is softer than steel. So I'd want a steel frame Mini, and it would have to be a Pro phone for that. So I want Mini to not just stick around, but like be taken seriously. And in the up next, I wrote in in all caps, I wrote in stop using iTunes. So the issue with iTunes is that it still exists. So basically, in macOS, Apple totally ditched iTunes. I believe it was in maybe Mojave, but definitely Catalina. Because iTunes sucks. So they made dedicated Photos app, a dedicated TV app, a dedicated podcast app, and then for actually interfacing with your iPhone, you just do it in Finder, which is great. But on Windows, because Apple doesn't make that much software for Windows, and because Windows uses File Explorer obviously and not Finder obviously. Windows has iTunes still, and it sucks just as much as it ever has, and I hate iTunes, and it's the worst, but I don't have a new Mac, so I can't really do anything about having to use iTunes. And so what I want from Apple is to ditch it. Make better software for your non-Mac using iPhone users, because not everyone uses a Mac, and you sell more iPhones than you do Macs, so you have to realize that the majority, or that some large amount of your iPhone users will use a Windows PC for one of many reasons. So improve your PC software. Make like an iPhone manager software instead, or like maybe port over all those apps that you made for Mac OS. Probably pretty unlikely, but maybe make like a mini Finder for Windows, or like and like a Photos app and a music app and a podcast app. Like, I don't know, something, just because I hate iTunes so much, and it's so unintuitive. Also, fix the iCloud app, and maybe while you're at fixing the iTunes and the iCloud app, put them together into one just hodgepodge of Apple, or one conglomerated Apple software for Windows, instead of a hodgepodge of all this legacy software. And then for the last of the sort of plausible but probably unlikely things, I put in other App Store support. Mainly that desire comes from the Alt Store working so well on iOS, and from the whole Epic Games lawsuit, sort of encouraging Apple to be like, hey, we're not anti-competitive. Look, in our most recent update, we just added other App Store support. What are you talking about? So I think there's a legitimate legal reason why Apple has some encouragement to allow third-party app stores, so they don't seem anti-competitive, and just because third-party app stores are convenient. They could still be pretty rigorously locked down, but just any existence of any third-party app stores or third-party launchers that are officially supported, instead of just being these weird like bootleg development software loopholes, would be very nice. Like a Fortnite launcher or something would be great. Not because I play Fortnite mobile, but because it would mean that you don't have to get it from the App Store, right? And that's like the whole Epic Games lawsuit. So yeah, and then my final thing that I want from Apple, but that this one I don't think will happen at all, is like, hey Apple, just let me fix my phone if it breaks. Maybe don't serialize your parts. Maybe let me change my camera or my screen if something goes wrong, and like don't get mad at me for it, because like what's that all about, But yeah, that's definitely not happening. Just the way that repair legislation is going, it's all kind of weird, and Apple hates you. So yeah, no fixing your device. And then if you thought this was the end of the video, because I went through my laundry list of things I want from Apple in the next year, or maybe the next 2 years, or however long it takes them to just do things a little bit better. I've brought a list for you of things that I want from Windows, so don't forget, I did mention Windows at the beginning, and I'm going to talk about it. Now, there's not as much as I want from Windows or Microsoft in general, mostly because I know that Windows will probably get updated with the things I want sooner rather than later, unlike with all the iPhone stuff. And also, I'm not asking for any hardware from Microsoft because I don't want a Surface. And frankly, I don't really care what the Xbox is running because it's not Windows. So yeah, so I'm really just asking for Windows software features. First thing I put in is a simple feature, and one that I think is going to come sooner rather than later, is more temperature sensing in Task Manager. So in Windows 20H2, they added GPU temperature monitoring in Task Manager with supported drivers, which the latest drivers on AMD and NVIDIA do support temperature sensing, and it's nice. It's just like a nice thing to have. It's not all that accurate. Like it might be off a couple degrees or whatever, but I think it's great because it means I don't have to download third-party software to look at my temperatures. And while that's not like a huge issue or a huge ask, it's just a convenience. Like it's cooler to me, no pun intended, to be able to install Windows and then just open Task Manager to look at my temperatures instead of having to go and get hardware monitor or whatever. So that'd be nice, and I think they'll do that sooner rather than later. Something that I won't think they'll do sooner, but that they will probably do at some point because it's in their best interest, is my next point, which is fix HDR. It's awful. HDR in Windows is the worst thing I've ever had to deal with in terms of display anything in Windows. Resolution scaling in Windows is pretty bad, but it pales. Its frustration pales in comparison to what I've experienced with Windows HDR settings. Not only does it not let you like touch anything, you just kind of like flick a switch on, which doesn't help. It also completely ruins the look of a lot of SDR content. Not everything, but it can really mess up the colors of SDR content. And it's just not that good. So, you flip the HDR button on and you have a supported graphics card and everything, and like everything is perfect. Your display is HDR compatible, and you go to play HDR content and it just doesn't look that great because Windows HDR sucks a lot. So yeah, I fix HDR, Windows. Like, please, it's a growing niche, and HDR is like a generally like actually nice to have thing. So maybe don't just make it this crappy toggle in your display settings, and like make it like actually work in a way that's intuitive and like actually looks good and doesn't completely destroy SDR content, which is most of things. And if you can't handle your SDR operating system being destroyed by your HDR setting, make your operating system HDR compatible. Just that simple. So yeah, seems pretty obvious, but they haven't done anything. So, and then okay, up next I wrote in just get rid of control panel. I get you're trying to ease users into it, but honestly, just rip the band-aid off and force me to use settings like Apple. So yeah, Control panel for a long time was the main place to go in Windows for you to change basically anything, from uninstalling apps to power management to security settings, to personalization. It was all in Control Panel. And then slowly throughout Windows 10's lifespan, more of those settings have been added to settings, and then at some point altogether migrated to settings. So at some point, the option in the settings menu has replaced the option in Control Panel. Or if you go to that option in Control Panel, it will open it in settings, and it will not exist in Control Panel. But yeah, so at some point, Microsoft, you got to realize that if you want to get rid of Control Panel, you just got to do it. You just got to put every setting in settings and just delete Control Panel. Just don't make it a program on my computer, and then I don't have to worry about it. So yeah, I mean, Apple in Mac OS has just system preferences. There's no question. You just if there's a setting to change, it's in system preferences. So just do it. Just rip the Band-Aid and put everything in settings and let me suffer. Because honestly, settings isn't that bad. But yeah, my biggest gripe with settings really is that its selection of actual things to change is limited, because it's Apple or Microsoft is still trying to keep things in Control Panel. And I get it. Control Panel has been around for a very long time, and it's pretty scary to users that they have to use the settings menu. It's new and different, but guys, if you find a way to make it better, then you don't have to be so scared. Be more confident in your product and make the settings menu usable, because other than Windows Update and a couple display settings, and maybe some sound stuff, I hardly use the settings app, and I much prefer to just default to settings. Okay, something that they've kind of been doing already that I just want them to keep doing, because if they let up now, it would be really disappointing, is drivers in Windows. So drivers in Windows 10 have always been great compared to 7 and 8, where driver the driver management was basically useless, where they couldn't find drivers or really touch any of that. Windows 10 has been able to consistently find stable drivers for every device, including chipset and graphics. Even if they're not the most up-to-date drivers, they're stable and they work out of the box. And then so recently in Windows 20H2, so before in Windows 10, you'd go to the device manager. You could go to device manager, just right-click, update on individual drivers, and it would find them eventually. It would take a little bit, maybe there'd be a small update or whatever, but it would get you a driver per device. And then in Windows 20H2, that button still exists, but I found that it doesn't actually work like it used to. So it used to be that you'd go to each individual driver and you'd hit update, and it would actually update it. But now what Windows 20H2 does is it doesn't care about the device manager. The device manager lately is more or less a list of the drivers you have, and their properties menus. Because now when you update drivers in Windows 10, you go to the settings app, and when you click update in Windows Update, it'll have it will specifically tell you what are drivers, and under the optional drivers tab, or the optional updates tab, it'll have drivers. And it's great. It's even better than Device Manager, because now instead of having to individually click every device that I want to update, I hit a checkbox for all of the devices, then I hit go, and it updates all of them. And any of them that it doesn't do, I can do on a second round. So it's way easier. It doesn't really save time or anything, but it's just convenient. But what I want them to do beyond this is, first of all, I want them to remove the Device Manager's functionality for it. Remove the button if it's not going to work, and just redirect me to settings to update my drivers, first of all. Second of all, make a specific context menu in settings for updating my drivers. So instead of it being nestled into Windows Update and part of Windows Update's optional updates, give me a separate tab or a separate category in Windows Update that is driver updates. So give me a system updates, and give me a driver updates tab. just to keep things more organized and to make sure that I can specifically keep my drivers updated without having to click into any menus. Put the word driver in a main menu under the updates, update and security tab, and it will look a lot cleaner and it will be much more accessible. Also, like, it's a great support tool because part of people's machines running well is making sure that they have the latest drivers, or that their drivers are updated. And so it's pretty apparent that Microsoft has put a much greater emphasis on making sure that manufacturers submit drivers through Windows Update. Like I've seen things like laptops will get like straight up BIOS updates, firmware updates through Windows Update, which like 2 years ago was absurd to me, but lately it just works. And so yeah, just improve on that. Instead of it just being a weird part of Windows Update, make it make it a core feature of Windows that you just hit driver update and it gets drivers, and continue to encourage manufacturers to submit drivers to the Windows Update servers so that users can continue to have just the newest available drivers. It reminds me of like Linux, like package managers and stuff like that, where you don't really have to go anywhere to update your drivers. You kind of just get newest packages, and usually like the distro manager will give you all the links, because they don't. In the Linux world, it's like kind of absurd to like go to a manufacturer's website and like get their driver from there. Like, no, just find some place that's distributing every driver compatible with Linux and like the Linux kernel and whatever, and just like dump it all at once and make sure everyone's got the newest drivers all the time. And if Windows could go that way, that would be pretty cool. Okay, something that I want Windows to fix, so back to something that they need to fully just fix, like that sucks right now, similar to HDR, is Bluetooth. Bluetooth on Windows is abysmal in my experience. I've seen a lot of like connectivity issues with like speakers and stuff like that, like whereas on a Mac you can kind of just leave something connected. On Windows it'll just like get finicky and at some point just like not work, and you'll have to like reconnect it and like mess with your Bluetooth settings, and it's stupid. And it's not all that intuitive to get to and then use the Bluetooth settings, right? So hold on. Basically, when you want to change a setting with Bluetooth in Windows, you have to go into settings and you have to open the Bluetooth menu. And in the Bluetooth menu, you then click through your devices, and it's really vague as to what's actually connected and what's just paired, and it's frustrating and it's slow and weird, and I don't want to have to open a whole menu. So basically, Windows, give me something in like the system tray, or like in the little like notification thing on the side. There's a button for Bluetooth, and all that button does is turn it on and off if you left click it, and then if you right click it, it can just take you to Bluetooth. So it's like a shortcut. But go the extra mile. When I click that, when I right click that Bluetooth manager, instead like make it open a little like Bluetooth like sub menu. And let me like mess with Bluetooth settings outside of the settings app, because the settings app isn't like, while I want more things to be in the settings app, it's not always the most intuitive solution. Like I would find it completely asinine if on macOS, for example, if I had to go into system preferences every time to change my brightness or something like that, but I don't have to do that because there's a control panel for that, for example. And obviously it's not that bad with Windows. Like, yes, Windows has brightness management that isn't in the settings, obviously, but still, like, similar thing. Treat Bluetooth like you would treat like sound or brightness, and then it will be better. So do that. Another thing I put in here is make the start menu less unreliable. So the weird thing about things like the start menu in Windows is that they are very ingrained into how Windows 10 does things like telemetry. So, like, for example, the search function in Windows is integrally tied in with Cortana. And so removing Cortana, or Cortana breaking in any capacity, will destroy the search function in Windows. And vice versa. The search function being messed up will usually mean that Cortana's in some way messed up. and so, that, for example, and so the start menu itself, you'd think is like probably the most important menu to have as like a stable thing, because it's the start menu. It's where users go to like find their main programs and like hit the shut down button, like really basic stuff. And sometimes especially like I've seen on like newer installations and stuff like that, but sometimes the start menu just doesn't work. You hit the Windows button on your keyboard and it just doesn't do anything. So like, stop that. Fine. I think the problem is that everything in Windows is tied to something that has to do with telemetry or in some way phoning home to Microsoft, which has its own security concerns, but on top of that it has stability concerns, because if I have to be tied to a network or some sort of network related thing for my local stuff to work, it's probably not going to work all that well. So like, something that's really great about macOS's search function, macOS's Spotlight search, is that it's local. So it locally indexes the drive, and I talked previously in the tier list video about how APFS works and how APFS indexes files pretty efficiently. And so, but yeah, so Apple went out of their way to build their own file system and their own way to index files so that their indexing function in their operating system could be better. And now I'm not saying you have to rewrite NTFS or whatever. Like, NTFS is fine, just whatever. It's got its shortcomings separately from indexing, but it's separately from NTFS. Just improve the OS side of indexing files, and don't make it so that searching for things in Windows is almost useless. And then on top of that, while you're at it, don't make it attached to something like Cortana, because Cortana is a virtual assistant that needs the internet to function. And why would I want internet functionality to be a core part of local usage of my machine? That is completely absurd. So like, yeah, just food for thought, Microsoft. Maybe if core OS functionality wasn't tied to weird telemetry settings and online apps, maybe they'd be more stable. And maybe if they functioned independently of each other, maybe they'd be more stable. Just a thought, And then the last thing I think I put in here was give me I wrote in, give me a more intuitive Xbox games app so that I'll actually use it for managing, buying, or downloading titles related to Game Pass PC and so on, so I can diss the Microsoft Store if I just want to play video games. So what I meant by that is, like, the Xbox has the whole Xbox Store. Just put it on Windows. You have this whole Game Pass PC thing, and I think they're working on something like that. But the last time I saw it, it was pretty basic. It was essentially just a launcher for Game Pass. And I'd want it to be more than that. I want there to be like an Xbox games window, so that I can where I can specifically browse for just games on Windows, on the Windows Store, because there are, the Game Pass exists, and I'd want to look at it in an app like that, and then where I can manage downloads and file locations and have it be a launcher, just like Steam or Origin or whatever launcher, or GOG, all that. Basically, just make it so that it's a launcher first and foremost, and let me ditch the Microsoft Store, because Microsoft Store is useful for updating apps and stuff like that as well. But if I can update my games, which I care much more about than the calculator app, I'd like to do that in an app that's a little bit more intuitive. So yeah, there's my wish list of things for Windows, and yeah, there's the 2021 wish list. Some of these things were pretty basic, and some of these things were very glaring flaws with Apple and Microsoft's software and hardware. But in general, some of them aren't too much to ask. Things like Bluetooth controls in Windows and a battery percentage in iOS really aren't that hard. So I think you could toss them in. But yeah, I don't really, realistically, I don't think that most of the things I mentioned will be put into anything, because things like the iPhone already have immense development and R&D and all that put into them. The iPhone 13 is probably already canned as to almost exactly what it's going to look like next fall. and iOS 15 has already probably been well underway for the last like 2 years. In Windows 10, basically the only way to know if a feature you've been waiting for is when Windows 10 puts out its insider preview builds, which usually have basically every feature of the next upcoming update. So I'll know if Windows has added the things that I want from them in the preview builds for 21H1 and 21H2 in the spring and the fall respectively. So I'll just sort of find out for those two. But yeah, just something fun that I thought about that I wanted to just sort of document. Yeah, there it is. So thank you for listening, and this video wasn't quite as short as I'd hoped, but hopefully you enjoyed it and maybe even listened all the way through. So yeah, that's it. Bye-bye.